Hey friends, so in this video what we're going to do is discuss an implication and an argument for Bruner's view about the narrative self. So the implication is that truth and falsity simply don't apply to our narratives about ourselves. Why? Well, if you wanted to check the truth or falsity of a narrative, you'd have to check it against something outside of the narrative. So, for instance, you'd likely check it against the self as it exists independently of the narrative. Now, the thing is that the narrative just is the self. And so there is no self apart from the narrative. So we can't check our self-narratives against something outside of them. So what does that mean? Well, it means that instead of evaluating narratives along the line of true and false, we evaluate them for internal coherence, livability, and adequacy. So internal coherence is just making sure that parts of our narrative don't wildly conflict with one another. So for example, I'm vegan, and suppose I wanted to tell myself a story about being, a true blue hardcore vegan, never going to eat meat or animal products ever again, completely eschew them. So if I have that in my narrative, it would be incoherent if I were to also have as part of my narrative that I eat bacon cheeseburgers every night for dinner. So that would be a lack of internal coherence. Now, livability is about just that, right? Being able to live with this narrative. So this narrative that you have about yourself, can you carry that on in your life? Can you live with this narrative? Is it the kind of narrative you want to have for yourself? And finally, adequacy. Is it an adequate narrative? Does it do enough for you? Does it live up to the goals and expectations you have for yourself? So that was the implication. So now let's move to the argument. Why think that there really is this narrative self? Why accept the narrative self over the atomistic, individualistic view of the self? Well, Bruner's argument here is one about the adequacy of the theory, right? So for those of you in 101 or who have taken 101, which presumably is everybody, you might remember this as an inference to the best explanation. So we have two competing explanations about the nature of the self: the individualistic explanation and the narrative explanation. So what makes the narrative explanation superior? Well, Bruner points out that there are a lot of non-Western views about the self that simply don't fit in to the individualistic view of the self. We find this, for example, in a lot of East Asian cultures, right? In a lot of cultures on the Indian subcontinent, and also in Native American cultures, and often in many Latinx cultures. So the individualistic view of the self simply doesn't fit with non-Western views of the self, right? So what we have then is we have an alternative, the narrative view of the self. And this can incorporate both non-Western and Western views about the nature of the self. How? Well, the Western view about the nature of the self is that the self is individualistic. So we're telling ourselves a narrative about how the self is individualistic. Non-Western views, there's a narrative that the self is not individualistic, that who we are is constituted by our friends, our neighbors, our communities. And so because the narrative view explains more of the data, it's the better theory.